Hello and welcome to this channel. My name is not important, but those of you who know it, you know who you are. This is our fourth installment of Petrolheart, and I'm here with my guest Sheldon, who is joining us live from South Africa. Say hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Alright, so today we're going to address a weird topic, and if you know me, well, weird is sort of a trend, and today we're going to talk about the relationship between Volvo and the Zen philosophy. Now, I'll start by saying that apparently there is no relationship, or it would seem at first glance, but when you get right down to it, and especially in certain cars, you get that sense that although unwittingly, they have been influenced by Zen. So, Sheldon, is there any particular Volvo car that you have taken a liking to?
For myself, it'd have to be the 850 series. Obviously, the 80R, a massive fan of that and the engine. But that's still on the modern side as far as Volvo is concerned. But that I'd have to say is my favorite.
Well, I have to agree with that. The 850R, especially the 850R wagon, is possibly my dream wagon.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more there.
It would be that and the Datsun 510 wagon, but I would prefer a Datsun 510 sedan, to be honest. And I've done a whole episode on why the Datsun 510 is brilliant and what it could teach the auto industry. It's the first episode of this podcast, and shameless plug, you should check it out. So, but now back to Volvo. Now, if we take a look at a really old Volvo, like the Volvo 740, was it? Any old Volvo, really, especially the 242, we can see the main idea or the ethos of that Volvo is somewhat the not a car. The idea that a Volvo is not a car, it's just transport. And that feeling is present pretty much everywhere in all history of Volvo. A Volvo is more than a car because it is a not car. And that's where I start to see the similarity with Zen philosophy. A Volvo does not try to be a car. It is not defined by being one, it is defined by being a transport, a safe, reliable, affordable transport. The fact that it takes shape in the form of a car is merely coincidental. So it is Volvo has succeeded in creating a car but by creating a not car. So what do you think about that?
I couldn't agree with you more there. You just see this from the way that they approach the auto industry as a whole. They don't consider any other brands their direct competition. You see this come out twice, just with their patenting process. Obviously, with the well-known three-point safety harness. Niels Bohren invented. They didn't patent it. They could have made that a privatized feature of their cars, but instead they gave it to all auto manufacturers, and now obviously it's a standard in almost every car on the road. And another time they did something like that was with the that carbon sensor, the MAF sensor, that every car with fuel injection runs these days in order to reduce their emissions. They just gave that away as well. And I think that just reflects the fact that they consider themselves not a car manufacturer, so not in competition with car manufacturers.
Well, you really touched on a cornerstone of the Zen philosophy, which is the lack of aggression and the concept of inner peace that comes with the Zen mentality of meditation, introspection, and peace. And Volvo have really done that really well because their cars are the least aggressive car, both in their aesthetic. Like you see nowadays, you see the Fiesta SD, the Focus SD, those middle-aged, midlife crisis, anger-fueled pocket rockets. You know, as Mr. Regular, as Mr. Regular would say, it's frustration and anger and sex. And that would be what Mr. Regular would say about them. But in all honesty, most cars nowadays, and I will touch on this subject on a future episode, perhaps 2 episodes from now, but most cars nowadays are just super aggressive in their looks. Even economy cars, you can see that on every Volkswagen, even the Golf. The Golf, which used to be a plain-looking Econobox, now looks angry. But more than angry, it doesn't look furious, it just looks plotting. As if it were frustrated, burdened by the vicissitudes of life. And that is the other side of Volvo's Zen philosophy. A Volvo is never bothered. It's never underpowered nor overpowered. A Volvo reaches absolute balance not by means of compromise, but by means of not being. And that's the thing about Volvo. Most people's idea, and there is a book, before I mention this, there is a book most people here would read, and I do want to know if you have read this book. It has nothing to do with cars. In fact, I very much doubt most car people have known about this book for a time because, well, it's not in any way related to anything car related. It's called The One-Dimensional Man by Herbert Marcuse, and if I do remember, I will put a link in the description below to a PDF of it. So please do give it a read. I don't know, Sheldon, have you read this book?
No, I haven't. I've heard of a book called Flatland, which is about a two-dimensional man, but I've never heard of a book called One-Dimensional Man.
Alright. Flatland, as far as I know, Flatland is a book more on the subject of mathematics. And
and geometry.
Geometry, which is my absolute favorite subject in mathematics. Like, geometry is beautiful. And non-Euclidean geometry is even more beautiful. But back to topic. Herbert Marcuse, I think he was a German philosopher and sociologist. On his book, The One-Dimensional Man, he explores the idea that we approach everything by binaries. By binaries, black and white, man and woman, young and old, life and death. And then we draw a line, an imaginary line between those polar opposites until they become a spectrum. And now we have the lifespan between life and death. Now we have the intersection between man and woman. Now we have the grayscale between white and black. And that is how most people, according to him, conceive the world, have that worldview based on spectrums. And you can see that on, well, basically, even secular countries have this idea. The whole concept of good and evil, and whatever it is in between. Even if we go full nerd and mention Star Wars, the dark and light side of the Force, and the concept of the Great Jedi. All of these concepts talk about balance, but it is not, I would say, true balance. It is balance through compromise. It is balance that cancels itself out, so you're left with nothing when you started with everything. So it's the Fiesta ST, all the way back to the Fiesta ST. The Fiesta ST tries to balance being a reliable daily driver, a fun weekend warrior, and a compensation mechanism for the midlife crisis of anyone. And it succeeds
And
at
let's
those
just,
things.
yeah, I was about to say, let's just admit that it does succeed at those things before we blow holes in it. But you were on that point exactly.
Yeah, it succeeds. But in succeeding at those things, it stops being adequate for the thing that the original Fiesta or the original Focus was. Because it has become so involved in multitasking that while it does all it's designed for rather well, it's no longer memorable. It's no longer a car you will want to own in the future. It's not. It has become just a car. It has become a regular, run-of-the-mill hot hatch.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there. I mean, yeah, what am I supposed to say to that? It's just the truth.
But when we look at Volvo, we see that they achieve balance. But they achieve balance not through compromise, but through not being, through not wanting a car. You know, that I don't know if you're a man of faith, Sheldon, but I can assure you, I am not. But there is a passage in the Bible. It's called, it's Psalm 23. Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And I did make some alterations to it, to make the Petrolheart version of it. It's the Lord, no, it's the road is my shepherd now. I shall not crash. Well, within that passage, there is a concept of not being, of not being fully realized by yourself. And there's another passage in the Bible, Matthew 5:3, if I'm not mistaken. I really need to get my Bible on. But Matthew 5:3 talks about the poor in spirit are those who will inherit the kingdom of heaven. Thing is, that spiritual poverty, that lacking of spirit, doesn't imply that the whole spirit is gone. It just means that it has been surrendered. And that is a cornerstone of Western thinking. So back to the Focus or the Fiesta ST. Those cars have surrendered the spirit to the drives, wants and needs of the market. But they have not lost it completely. But we take the Volvo 242, the original Swedish brick. That car was never made with the spirit in mind. It is so pure that it does not need to surrender itself to anything. And in that sense, it becomes greater because it isn't. It is not, therefore it is truly balanced.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm wondering if you're wanting me to draw the parallel now between the Fiesta ST and the Volvo 850. Since you know they are such different cars. It's effectively, I mean, the new EcoTech ST aside, they share the same heart. They have the same Volvo engine. The turbo still says Volvo on it. Yet, more so than just the packaging of that engine, you can see the different priorities, the different focuses, and the different ideologies from both the car companies. Despite that, they've effectively wrapped the same package as far as engine and drivetrain goes.
Well, that's exactly right. And even beyond the focus is like if we move towards the Golf R, the Golf GTI, it's just, and back to that aggressiveness of the looks of any car. Even modern Volvos are not aggressive. They are somewhat edgy in the styling, but they are not overly aggressive. They are serious though. The styling has never been goofy. And that touches on another side of Zen philosophy, which is, the implicit stoicism. And I did touch on this topic a bit on the last episode. The implicit stoicism of a Volvo, because a Volvo is always a serious car. Even when it's used to have fun, it does it righteously and seriously, because and this takes a bit from not only from Zen philosophy, but from the whole Japanese ideology and a bit of the Bushido, the samurai code. The idea that discipline always comes from within, because if it does not come from within, then it is not real discipline.
Yes, and it can't be drawn from external acceptance at all. And you do actually see that in even modern day Japan. Even though they've got that new strange youth culture there, even still, when you give someone a compliment, they will refute it or often say the exact opposite of the compliment you've given them. Which I think shows exactly what you're trying to illustrate with the Volvo and their lack of displaying their feelings, their hardships.
Yeah, because for the Japanese person, a compliment just means they are doing their duty. It is not to be complimented when the only thing they are doing is what they think is right. Because doing things right is the rule, not the exception. In Western culture, since we have this idea, especially in America, where we have the idea of American exceptionalism and how America feels like the chosen people, you have this idea that we are to be complimented for who we are in terms of doing good for others. And back to Volvo, Volvo doesn't take compliments. It doesn't need them, really. A Volvo, one never comments on how good it looks, how fast it goes. One never comments on a Volvo unless one is thoroughly interested in a Volvo. Ask anyone and they'll tell you it's just a good car. Nothing more, nothing less. And that is the core component here, that in creating a transport, they have created the quintessential car. What amazes me the most about Volvo, both as a company and as a set of cars, and even to this day we see in the S60 and the S40 and even the C30, which I think is one of the best looking hatchbacks, especially the back, so unique, and yet it makes sense, it's practical, and it doesn't draw attention to itself. So one of the things that strikes me as odd from Volvo, especially being a Western company, is how it has unwittingly taken in all these principles of Zen. So why do you think that is?
Well, I mean, I can point out that firstly, they're not any longer a Western company. You know, they may have started with uniquely Western ideologies, but technically they're owned by a Chinese corporation at the moment. But I don't think that's had any impact on who Volvo is or what they're trying to portray. I think the reason that they adapted that sort of philosophy towards the way that they manufacture their cars is summarized well simply in their mission statement, which states that cars are driven by people, and therefore their guiding principle needs to remain safety. It needs to be around those people, not around moving those people from A to B as quickly as possible or as stylishly as possible, simply tailoring everything they can do to that. And that contrasted with the fact that Sweden has always been eco-conscious and balanced their resources well. You know, Sweden, their population is stable. It's a stable population, which is rare in this world. The Volvo factories at the moment are all powered by hydroelectric plants. That stemmed from their love of nature and their understanding of balance. So I'm not saying it was necessarily drawn from the Eastern cultures, but there definitely overlaps there, you know.
Well, you do bring up an interesting point, because it would seem that this sort of it doesn't stem necessarily from Eastern culture or from Japan. You know, before I go on, the Japanese have a word called kaizen, and ultimately it stands for constant improvement. It's been turned into a sort of business buzzword, and you've most likely heard of it and even implemented, given your background.
Yeah, I have heard of it. You know, that kind of philosophy. It still boggles me from the culture I come from. You know, but I do understand. You know, the what you're trying to explain to me. You know, it's the constant improvements of tasks through minor. You know, you're scraping off millimeters of friction, so to speak. You know, every time you do the thing it is that you do, you must do it a little bit better than the time you did before, which actually shouts out, speaks miles about the Japanese culture as a whole, and why we see such strange things come out of Japan, because they don't care so much what you're doing as how and why you're doing it, you know, and how well you're doing it. So I could be into anything under the sun, but so long as I'm dedicating the energy and the time and the effort to it, I will be respected for that, regardless of how silly the subject matter may or may not be.
Yes, exactly. Even cars in Japan reflect this idea. The existence of the Honda NSX, which is one of my, possibly my favorite supercar, even though it's possibly one of the slowest supercars ever. But it was developed with such a focus on performance that it's hard not to respect it. And what you said about Volvo's mission statement, the one about, well, people, and cars are for people, and thus safety is a priority. Well, most people think of automotive safety as seatbelts, airbags, and electronic nannies that, you know, take away from the fun of driving. But Volvo has taken a rather different approach, you know, especially in more modern Volvos. The concept of safety, it is not only achieved by having a safe car, but by having a safe driver and a safe road. That trinity of road, car, and driver. And you can see that in Sweden. The roads are well maintained. They have good infrastructure, and their cars are well maintained. They are sturdy. They are built for the weather, and the drivers have to pass, well, we would consider them ludicrous driving tests. And the culture there promotes good driving, safe and attentive driving. So Volvo have not only built cars that are safe as cars only, but that encourage the driver to drive in a safe manner. A Volvo is planted, it feels solid, it gives off an almost immovable feeling. Sitting in a Volvo is like sitting in a comfortable desk chair. It feels as if you are only going to move when you want to move. And that is exactly what happens. A Volvo transmits that feeling of confidence in the face of uncertainty. It fills the driver with enough confidence to exert his or her full ability without dabbling into risky territory. In that sense, a Volvo is safe not only because of the devices it has, but the aura it inspires in the driver. Now, I realize most of this doesn't come from Eastern philosophy, but as you've said, it does overlap. But it comes from a lifestyle of non-aggressiveness, and I think that's the key here. A Volvo is never aggressive. Even the Polestar Volvos, the performance variant, is, well, quite, I'm going to say tame, but it is still user-friendly. It is still people-friendly, even though it is mind-bogglingly fast, the Polestar versions. But Volvo as a whole thrives on the idea that driving isn't an exercise of anger or of any so-called negative emotion. That driving is an exercise of peace.
I think that their philosophy extends further than that. I think they believe that life is an exercise of peace. That driving is just a conduit of that peace.
Yeah, I do agree with that. For Volvo, it is not about the fight so much as it is not needing the fight. And you can see that in how they tune their engines. Their engine tunes are not aggressive, nor are they conservative. They are enough to get up to speed, stay there comfortably, and when power is needed, power is applied. But the power follows the need, the action follows circumstance, not the other way around. It stems from a worldview that realizes how small humanity as a whole is in the grand scheme of things. It could be said that Volvo is one of the few car companies that realizes how small we are and tries to convey that onto us.
Well, I mean, if their advertising campaigns over the years are to be believed, their whole business model is based on how fleeting a human life can be. I mean, any Volvo ad, not in the last, say, 5-10 years, but anything from the late 90s, early 2000s and back, it was all just car crash footage. And, you know, the moment you'd see a toddler flying out of a car seat, smashing through a windshield and onto the open road, that makes you feel a response. And, you know, that has certain implications as to, firstly, who's going to be interested in buying a Volvo, but secondly, why they're interested in buying that Volvo. To service what need, despite the fact that Volvo is almost not even trying to compete on that level. But people are interested in the Volvos for what reason? And I think the reason is how fleeting and small and pathetic a human life can be, and how easily it can be snuffed out. And that fear, that uncomfort in the general public is where, as you said earlier, Volvo stands as a rock. And people feel comfortable and safe with a Volvo.
Yes, and even modern Volvos have, although they have evolved to compete, or rather to exist in a market where other characteristics such as practicality, fuel economy are to be characteristics that determine what car is bought or what car is sought after. They have retained that value of life, philosophy, and rather ethos. And the one thing that it does clash, but at the same time it agrees with the Zen philosophy, is that life is temporary and to some extent devoid of meaning except for the one we give it. And one would think that would lead into nihilistic design choices, but it doesn't. Because Volvo, it's not an instrument of nihilism, but rather an instrument of Darwinian survival. The Volvo owner obtains a Darwinian advantage, even in modern society. It speaks to a primal level that we have somehow forgotten exists. Volvo, in a sense, is so in tune with our human nature by appealing to our biggest fear of death, by addressing the one question that has been on every hominid's mind from the moment that the missing link, from the moment that the Australopithecus africanus, or afarensis, I forget which one is the one that came first, spliced from the common ancestor it had with the other hominids. From then on, the question for humanity has been, how do I survive? And Volvo answers that question with 4 wheels and an engine. It tells us that we are not only safe, but that we are given an opportunity by ourselves to live another day. And it does so, most importantly, without malice. It does so in a factual yet natural way. It doesn't mock us for not being safe. It doesn't belittle those who don't drive a Volvo. It simply states that by itself it is a better choice, and you are ultimately the one that takes that choice. In that sense, the Volvo is the primordial vehicle when it comes to survival.
Yeah, I must say I do agree with you there. But again, despite what they encompass, despite what they may represent in the world, they do only interest a certain person. But as you said, it is sort of a Darwinian evolution sort of thing. Because someone may look at a Volvo and say, okay, with that price range, I could go out and I could buy myself something, a lot faster, or with a lot more space in it. Or, okay, that's a bad example considering Volvo's packing space. But that is too much compromise in one direction or the other. I could take the money of a Volvo, go buy a second-hand Supra, and yes, it would be quicker than the Volvo, but the cost on my life, just from a practicality point of view, from a safety point of view, from having to sacrifice so many different aspects to gain one aspect. Whereas, as you said before, Volvo kind of, lives through balance in all things. Which is why it can add to your life without detracting from any other aspect of it.
Yes, exactly. And even Volvos are fast. Like, they are to some people they say they are built like tanks. Well, they are built stronger than that. If one is to believe the pop culture and the internet culture. But also the thing that makes Volvo unique is that they have not foregone performance, even if in the grand scheme of things it might be seen as futile to have a fast car. Volvos do perform. I mean, take the 850R wagon and its history in touring car championships. Take the Polestar, again, the Polestar versions of the S60, or, well, take, for example, how ubiquitous Volvo has become in some parts of the drift scene. We've seen now Volvos, 242 Volvos, being used as drift cars, even though they were built as family cars, or rather they were built as safe family transport. They are so versatile without knowing so that they have become, well, drift missiles, more suited for it because they are simpler, more robust, more enduring than, let's say, an E30 BMW or an E36 BMW.
Not to mention the simple fact that you can fit more tires in the back of your Volvo if you're going to go drifting than you will in your any BMW.
Yeah, because they are designed to be a platform of whatever you use them for, unwittingly so, and that is what I find fascinating. Just like the Skyline and S-chassis Nissans, well, I say Skyline, I meant Sylvia. The S-chassis Nissans are the platform for all things JDM performance, and the Fox Body Mustang is the platform for all things American performance. The Volvo is the universal automotive platform, and I have yet to see, like, the only field it hasn't excelled in is off-roading, and I do believe that there are some off-road Volvos. I mean, there are Volvos which are used in rally, so actually we would have to say it does succeed a bit off-road.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing I must point out, I mean, a lot of these modern-day off-road cars are more than likely never actually going to see a dirt road in their life. But one thing that I found interesting is Jeremy Clarkson has always been a huge proponent of the Toyota Hilux. He started off being a supporter of the Land Rovers and then Toyota Hiluxes. Toyota Land Cruisers. And a couple years back, he sold his Land Cruiser, which even on Top Gear, he was publicly in huge support of his Land Cruiser. He sold that and he bought a Volvo XC90. Now, he's quite educated as far as car buying is concerned, and if there wasn't something to it, he wouldn't have done it. You know, he's the kind of person that would go out and spend an exorbitant amount of money on a Ford GT that he can't park anywhere in London. Yet he made such a conscious decision that his daily car is going to be the Volvo XC90.
Well, there is one saying that accurately describes Jeremy Clarkson, and that saying is, it takes a genius to portray an idiot. And
Amen.
That's exactly it. His Top Gear persona is basically a petrol-sniffing oaf with the stature of an orangutan. But in reality, he's quite smarter than that. I mean, his knowledge of cars and even of practical things as engines and mechanics far surpasses what people think from Top Gear.
Yeah, not to mention his handle on the English language. If you've ever written anything he's read, he just has such a command over English that he captures you in his text. As another point.
Yeah, his writing is magnificent. But then again, on old Top Gear, the new old Top Gear, as it will be known now, he does have to portray the character of the wreck-loving, burnout-doing, drifting sideways into a hedge kind of guy. Now, if we look at James May is actually both on-screen and off-screen quite brilliant, and James May is quite a lot like Linus Torvalds, the creator of Linux, sorry, it's pronounced Linux, even though I call it Linux. He is quite practical in the sense that practicality is his domain. And I would venture into saying that Volvo is a lot like James May because through practicality, Volvo has succeeded, even without, in a lot of fields, without even trying to be in those fields. James May has this show called The Reassembler, and I think
I was about to bring that show up. I love that show so much.
It is magnificent. It is magnificent, and Meg's voice is just so soothing.
Yeah, it is. I could just melt away.
Yeah, I could binge watch that all day.
Yeah, I'm so amazed that you've watched it. It's so great to. Yeah, I've never met anyone who's even watched an episode of it because no one seems to follow James May online. It's an absolute sin how few views those videos are getting.
But that is exactly the thing. It would seem somewhat unjust that James May or Volvo has so little of a following. But then again, it proves the point that they don't need the following to be great. Some cars exist just because of the hype around them. Take the new Ford GT for example. The new Ford GT should have had the 5.2 liter Voodoo engine in it, because that engine is magnificent, and it's one of the best Ford engines in recent years. But instead it has this EcoBoost twin-turbo V6, because I think it's a twin-turbo, I don't recall right now, because Ford is trying slightly too hard to be eco-friendly.
I don't know if that's the case.
With the
I think that the reason that they put that EcoBoost engine in the GT is to bolster sales of every other EcoBoost engine they're building in the hot hatches as well as the Cougar. Because I can't speak for the Ford GT, I haven't been in one yet, but even the Ford Cougar, which is a 1.6 EcoBoost, I was shocked at how quick that thing was considering the size of it and it being a 1.6. But I think they're doing it as a marketing ploy to draw more attention to their smaller hot hatches, obviously that being their bread and butter.
Yeah, I think that you're right, you're spot on in that, because hot hatches, let's face it, Fiesta ST, Focus ST, that's what's been pretty much making Ford just survive right now. That and the Mustang. Even the Mustang has EcoBoost engines. They have the 2 liter EcoBoost and the V6 there. But then again, the GT40 being an EcoBoost car and more of a marketing ploy than a car built for performance alone speaks volumes about how Ford has twisted win on Sunday, sell on Monday, and has turned it into basically, well, I don't even know what it is anymore. So I personally believe the Ford GT would be better off with the 5.2 liter Voodoo. Perhaps a turbocharged version of that engine would be really exciting to see. But I digress.
Yeah, we can but dream of that engine, of that combination happening. Hopefully someone will be mad enough to buy a Ford GT and chop it up, just for the sake of science.
Well, here's the thing. If any of our viewers is a bored Middle Eastern billionaire, those oil billionaires from the Middle East who buy supercars, well, if any of our viewers is an oil tycoon from the Middle East who is bored and wishes to spend a couple $1 million on a unique car, well, hit me up. I could build you a GT with a turbo Mustang engine, the 5.2 liter Voodoo. So, just hit me up and I'll most likely be able to build that, and it will be amazing.
Yeah, I don't need to take a specifically Middle Eastern oil tycoon. I'll take a Russian or Canadian oil tycoon too. I'm not going to be as picky as you.
Yeah, so anyway, if you're a billionaire who's bored with your current garage, even though it's stuffed with Bentleys and Rolls Royces, hit us up. We might be able to cook you something far more exciting that no one else has. In any case, Volvo is a lot like James May in the sense that it is followed by a small group of like-minded people who are from different backgrounds. And it transcends its presence as a brand or as a TV personality into an individual that gives you a primal feeling of safety. Especially with Volvo's cars, they have transcended everything that a car is supposed to do. And they can be everything. The thing is that everything comes at a reasonable price. One that a lot of people don't seem to be willing to pay, because as you pointed out, for the price of a Volvo XC90 you could buy something much more dangerous and much faster.
Yeah, no, definitely. But then again, it speaks to the person who's buying it, and perhaps it speaks to the individual's ideology, belief system, whatever you want to call it, as to whether they'd choose to go for the more dangerous alternative or for the Volvo. Perhaps that speaks bounds about personal development and acceptance of who you are, both as a human and as an individual.
Yeah, it also speaks about your identity as a petrolhead and how your taste in cars reflects how you view life at the moment, and how Jeremy Clarkson is a weekend nihilist and a weekday family man. I mean, if he daily drives a Volvo XC90, which is, well, let's face it, quite a popular SUV, well then, it does say how he cherry-picks the days he's dangerous and the days he's sensible. And well, that is Jeremy Clarkson for you.
Yeah, and you know, we've been quick to compare Volvo to James May, but maybe the more apt comparison is to Jeremy Clarkson. Because he seems to have a better balance than James May. James May seems to be all one side and not the other. Whereas, as strange as it may sound, maybe Clarkson's the one with the better balance, because, as you say, he is quote, a weekend nihilist. So I don't know there.
I would venture into saying that all of the three members, or rather ex-members of Top Gear, represent a side of Volvo. Like, Jeremy Clarkson has those two sides. He represents the earthly commoner vision of how we view life in binaries and spectrums. James May represents the lack of sides. He is one-sided, but he is actually zero-sided. He is a Mobius strip. A one-dimensional Mobius strip, which is a mathematical absurdity. But that is James May. And Richard Hammond is the practical, down-to-earth type who has fun on the weekend. And if we look at how the three of them work together, you can see that they are factual, yet entertaining, yet reassuring. And the Volvo is similar. A Volvo can be lots of fun when driven fast. And yet, we we don't think of them as cars just for fun. We think of them as, well, the best all-rounder. So I think, and we are gonna be closing in a few minutes. We are going to be, well, closing this topic in a few minutes. I think every family should own a Volvo at some point, because it is quite a safe alternative. And yet, for a petrolhead or a car enthusiast, I would argue that the best Volvo for a car enthusiast would be the 850R wagon. I don't know, what do you consider to be the best Volvo for a car enthusiast?
As far as the best Volvo for a car enthusiast, I have to, because of my own personal preference to exactly the car you've described, agree with you there. But again, it depends on your definition of car enthusiast. Because I might say my best one is an old Volvo 200 series, because you could still get them in the rear-wheel drive, if I'm not mistaken. But I can't argue with the fact that my personal preference is the one I'd recommend for anyone, is the 850R wagon, and for a reason that you mentioned earlier. The fact that they do conservatively tune their engines without undercutting themselves, and that as a petrolhead you can get the comfort and confidence from driving a well-built Volvo, as well as a fairly easy to tweak with and to tune and to educate yourself on engine, because those T5 engines, effectively, to get more power, you just crank a little bit of more boost. But it's a rudimentary engine as far as modern engines are concerned. But it's got good power, it's stable, it's solid as a rock, and it's good for educating yourself on. So if you're going with the same kind of car enthusiast as you would describe me as, and from what I can tell yourself as, yeah, I'd say the 850 definitely.
Well then, I would like to add the one other Volvo that I would love to own is the P1800, driven
I
by
knew you were going to say that.
Roger Moore in The Saint. It is just breathtakingly beautiful, and
it is.
Although that Volvo, I would not keep its original engine, I would just keep the bodywork. That Volvo would be most likely SR20 DET swapped and made into some kind of Sylvia that actually looks good.
Okay, I could understand. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be able to touch that car. If I owned one, I'd just leave it alone. I'd put it in a shed to be found by someone 100 years after I'm dead.
It would be
I wouldn't be able to touch it.
Car.
Yeah, exactly. It would be kept pristine and left alone. Whereas if you gave me an 850, it would be pristine for all of 5 minutes.
Well, here's the thing. You've touched on perhaps the last point we're going to discuss in this podcast, in this episode of this podcast, that this sacredcy, this veil of sacredcy that has grown around all Volvos, and how you wouldn't put a finger on the P1800, and yet I would basically go berserk with the modifications while keeping the body looking as stock as possible. Because this air of exuberant safety Volvo has, it also speaks to the part of you who craves stability, and sense in life. So for one to modify a Volvo, one has to first disrupt one's understanding and, well, pretty much worldview in order to withstand the thought of tinkering and modifying a classic Volvo. So in that sense, I would, because I do not find them as sacred as you do. Maybe it's the differences between our different circumstances, or the fact that I have a tendency of wanting to buy really, really old cars and doing some kind of crazy resto mod, like, I don't know, a common Gia with a Subaru EJ25 in it, That would be sweet. But then again, that is, as you've said, personal preference. So I don't know, what do you think is the Volvo that it will be considered the most untouchable of the whole set of them? What Volvo would you say is untouchable and should be left as is? Sheldon?
Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. As I was saying, I'm going to make a bold prediction here, which may take you off guard a bit. But I think it is, in fact, going to be the 850, despite the fact that they are much older and much more valuable Volvos. I think we're going to see the Toyota Supra effect happen on them, where people have modified them and bought them cheap as heck and gone to town on them, and it's become so rare to find one in a pristine condition. The only time you're going to find a Volvo 850 these days in pristine condition is those one or two grandmothers that still have one left over. And I think soon we're going to see the price rocketing and the incentive to keep them stock and as the factory intended them, at that balance we've been discussing for the past hour. I see that incentive increasing. How long a time frame we're talking, I have no idea though.
I would give it at least 10 years, because then it would become, well, in certain countries you have regulations regarding how old a car must be to be considered collectible. In my country it's around 30 years, and it must have around 80% of all its original parts in terms of engine, transmission, etc. So whether or not you have that is, and I will agree with you there, because the 850 is one of the best sold Volvos. Like, we have now 740s and 850s all over the world. So it would make sense that it's taken on as a tuning platform from the Volvo community, and yet it will have, as you've said it quite amazingly, the Supra effect. Another Volvo that I think will gain set status, I think it's gonna be the C30 Volvo when it first came out, like in 2010, I think, 2005, I don't remember honestly, because the C30 Volvo is just a upper end hatchback that wasn't the most famous or the most sought after of its lineup. I mean, people consider the S60 so much more desirable. So I think the C30 is going to become what we think of the P1800 right now. The C30 is going to become the classic attractive looks Volvo. I don't know what your thoughts are on the C30 though.
I must say I absolutely love the car. I had the privilege of driving one. I can't quite say I agree with you in your comparison to the P1800, but again, it's very difficult to tell how history will treat things in the moment. Only in many years' time, when we look back, will we be able to say, okay, it has established itself as a classic. Because you look at a car like the classic Mini. That was never considered when they were in the development process, and even in the first couple of years of sale, it was never considered that it would become such a cult following, let alone such a sporting success. it became a classic unintentionally. They saw a need, they saw a problem, they tried to develop a solution, and they discovered the recipe for success. And Volvo could very well do that with the C30, but I'm in no position to make a prediction.
Well then, I guess, as always, we leave the question to time and the audience to tell us. A friendly reminder to our audience that if you do want to support our this whole endeavor of Petrolheart and the videos and the engineering and the explaining stuff with 3D models, because I can't draw on a piece of paper and I don't have a camera, so I might as well do it on a 3D model. I'm gonna be doing a series of videos on that. I'm also going to be doing a series of, well, continue my gaming videos, maybe take up Need for Speed Underground 2 as a, well, as one of the games I play in career mode in my channel. So I might make some Let's Plays of that, because it was such a popular game back in the day, and so many people seem to love it, that I just might as well. I mean, I enjoy playing it, might as well play it all over again. Thing is, I am also on the lookout for, well, old games that I might be able to play, and also new and exciting topics to address here on Petrolheart. So if any of you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below. And I just want to thank Sheldon today for being an awesome guest and just sharing his thoughts and impressions here on Petrolheart. So I don't know if you want to say some goodbye words to the audience.
Yeah, I'd love to say thank you very much to yourself. It was an awesome experience. If you'd ever have me back again, I'd be privileged. I am going to take the opportunity to whore out my Instagram, which is only car pictures, the_confused_Yeti. Go check it out. Obviously, like and subscribe down below, and have yourselves a wonderful day.
Well then, I think that is all for today. We have gone through quite a lot of topics here, and we do want to hear your opinion on the comments below. So I guess that is all. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.